Carol Lieberman, thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you.
So you heard my little spiel, my rundown that we had a mental health crisis in this country long before there was a COVID, but this is certainly an exacerbating situation that makes those who have mental problems maybe worse, and those who are just bordering on it really start to think they have them. What do we need to know, Doctor? And then, I'd like to get some observations from you on what we can learn from this and get better at it going forward.
Yes, this is, the focus has been on the physical part of coronavirus. And of course, that's important too, but we need more attention being paid to the mental health part of it. For example, hearing gloom and doom every day about, the media competes for the worst headlines, the most gloomiest and doomiest to get people to tune in. And that is having such a negative effect on us. It's stressing us out, and stress weakens the immune system, amongst other things. And really, it's making us more susceptible to getting coronavirus. That's number one.
Doc, I'm sorry. I just want to pop in for 1 minute here and ask you this. I've had a number of medical folks on who have said categorically, if somebody's mind is not in the right shape, then it actually could make them more susceptible from the anxiety and stuff. So what you're saying is the gloom and doom, like last week MSNBC had a big lower third that said this is death week, meaning it was the peak week. And every time you turn on the TV, it says death week. That starts to deteriorate the brain. And if the brain ain't working, then the body's going to follow, right?
Yes. I mean, it's just when you put those things out there, I mean, I don't know the point of, it makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we are all sitting here stressed out, anxious, and maybe depressed enough to commit suicide, then yes, it is going to be the biggest death week. So we need to change the language. That's number one. To me, it's like 9/11. There are a lot of things that are like 9/11 in coronavirus. And for example, we had, when the Twin Towers went down, we had people jumping from the Twin Towers and committing suicide in the weeks after 9/11 because they felt like, their whole sense of safety was destroyed, and they felt like the world was going to end and that kind of thing. And that there's something similar is going on now, where people can't think of what life is going to be like. It seems like some apocalyptic movie after we even come out of our homes, and we don't know what that's like, and that's scary. So, when we hear, for example, that unfortunately the worst part of coronavirus is dying alone. For that 1%, let me remind everybody, it's really only 1%. The higher percentage of the lethality rate came from other countries. So when we hear that people who have it, of course, have to die alone because they're in quarantine. And so when someone hears that over and over and over again, they want to take control of their own death, that maybe they could do it in a way that would be seem more pleasant or something, not that suicide or death is pleasant, but so there's a sense of wanting to take control. I'm not going to sit here and wait for a coronavirus to get to me. I'm going to take control of that. That's one of the things. There are a number of things that, of course, the economy is a big one too, where people who lost jobs or people who lost careers, I don't think there's going to be much call for a cruise ship captain for a while. And then, of course, people who built businesses, they put their heart and soul into businesses, and with closing them all down, many people will just end up losing their businesses. So it seems like, what do I have to live for? What's the point of getting through this and not getting sick and so on? So people need to realize that so much is coming from these negative messages. And so the number one thing to do is to not keep the television on 24/7. It is worse on television than radio, and it is worse certainly on certain channels than others. And you don't, and not that much changes. So you don't have to keep sitting there listening to this 24/7. You can check in, once or twice a day, but spend time doing better, more productive things. I always say that you need to look at this isolation. By the way, you mentioned about the hotlines. The calls to hotlines went up after isolation. It wasn't just since the beginning of when we realized, coronavirus was coming to America. It was the isolation. So we need to do things to make this isolation a positive thing. In other words, we have to change our attitude towards it. Instead of waking up every day and saying, oh, woe is me, another day in isolation, we can turn it around and see this time as a gift. Because, I'm sure you, just like I, we're on hamster wheels every day, work and other responsibilities and so on. And we think to ourselves, wow, I wish I had more time to read this book or to call an old friend or to do this or that, whatever it is. And now we have the gift of time.
Yeah, well, I try not to wade into the hamster pool, but yeah, my hamster wheel is different every day. But one thing's for sure, I'm here. But let me ask you this, because I've had Dr. Judith Kuryansky and some of the greatest psychotherapists, psychiatrists, psychologists on my show, and I always ask this question because I don't think people realize how small of a sign it could be. But what if you're talking to someone who was maybe going through it right before this happened? Now they're in isolation. Now they lost their jobs. I've been told time and time again that the biggest clue someone might actually commit suicide is A, they've tried before, or B, they've expressed it to you or to others. Are there little signs that people can see from a friend that they may be on the edge and they just don't have the nerve to pick up the phone and maybe try to cheer them up or something?
Well, one of the signs is if someone starts withdrawing from life. In other words, you call them up and you ask them what they've been doing, and they say, oh, nothing much. There's nothing much to do. We're just stuck here. And they just kind of seem like they've given up. That's really the number one sign. Of course, in terms of risk factors, one of the risk factors is isolation. Another risk factor is loneliness. So another risk factor is having people in your family who committed suicide. So you can sort of, I don't know, get those into the conversation. Well, you can tell them that you're concerned about them and ask them point blank. I mean, a lot of people are afraid to just be honest and say, you're not looking so good. You're not sounding so good. You seem to be disinterested in anything in life. How are you sleeping? How many hours of sleeping? That's another sign. And of course, people are having trouble sleeping because they're so worried about this. But if you get very little sleep, not only is that a sign of depression, but it's a sign that you're not going to be making really good decisions, common sense decisions. Of course, another sign is people who are drinking a lot.
Well, all of us right now are drinking a little more because, I host a television show every day from noon to 2 Eastern called Liquid Lunch, where we have a cocktail here and there, but I'm conditioned. Other people are, so other people are day drinking all the time now, and maybe that's another thing we got to watch out for.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I know, but you kind of do it. I mean, before coronavirus, you were kind of doing it in fun and to kind of get people to chat or to be relaxed or whatever. I mean, one drink isn't going to kill you, but there are people who are really taking this too far because they want to escape from the existence that we're having, because again, they don't have the correct attitude. I mean, there are so many things that the internet is just filled with things that you maybe have always wanted to learn, from playing an instrument to cooking to learning a new language. You just have to turn your attitude around and see this, as I said, as a gift.
One of the things, I'm Catholic, and I believe in one God. But one of the things that I tried to do during this time is I'm not one of these guys that was on the God Squad my whole life, although I believe in one God and I have faith. I kind of have used this time to read more, not just like people pray in emergencies, like, hey, God, get me out of this, but learn a little more, dig a little deeper, read some more, understand, how slim the boundaries were of my faith and how wide the boundaries really are on what I don't know, okay? And I'm trying to re-examine, me personally, my faith and how I exercise it and how I practice it and how I get better at it. It may, I don't know if you could see behind me here, but you can't see behind me, but I used to be a fledgling painter when I was a young man, and I've taken to making some paintings again also. So,
That's perfect. That's exactly the kinds of things that I'm trying to get people to do. Yes, perfect. And it's kind of interesting and sad. After 9/11, the churches and synagogues, all the houses of worship were filled, for a very long time. And we've kind of we've kind of gotten complacent and really have stopped being as religious as we were after that time. And it's really, like you're saying, it's really important not just turn to God to get me out of this, but to be more. I mean, you can get so much encouragement, so much something to hold on to, whatever kind of God you believe in, or even if you just believe in the universe. But you need some kind of higher power to believe in, to just to kind of center you, to make you feel as though there's some purpose and you're not alone and this matters.
Yeah, I mean, look, those are just some of my examples. I'm far from the greatest at my faith. I'm even further from the greatest at painting. I could tell you that, but I am always eternally optimistic. I know that me personally, I believe in a lot of homeopathic stuff where if you can get your mind right and balanced and you put positivity into the universe, you're going to extract positivity out of the universe. And if you sit there and search high and low for all the dark things in your life, you're not even going to have an eye to see the pieces of light. And I try to always, myself personally, Doc, I try to focus in on the little speckles of light rather than the big dots of black and hope that the little whites get bigger and the blacks get smaller. That's how I try to do it.
Yes, and that is so, so important, because, especially now as it's dragging on, it gets harder unless you do find some of these things to make you be interested and find some happiness each day. Unless you do that, then each day is going to drag you down more. So you really have to jump on top of this and find the things that give you pleasure. Well, I'm glad that you're not on the hamster wheel, but actually, there are a lot of things that I wish that I had time to do, and so in a sense, if you can look at it like that, then it's not that time is dragging along. In fact, when they were saying, sometimes they say, and then they change it, of course, but sometimes they say that, oh, it might not be as long as we thought it was going to be. My reaction has been, at the beginning, it was like, this is, I'm not a big fan of this isolation and so on. But then I started thinking, really? It's going to be shorter? You mean I might not get everything done that I want to do? So
Well,
you just have to change your thinking around.
yeah, well, you know what? The one thing we need are people like you to at least bring awareness to this. Hopefully there's one or two people out there watching today who know one or two people out there who may be on the brink of losing it, and people will, reach out, extend a loving hand, remind them to, check out their faith, read a book, paint a picture, draw a picture. But I have found it interesting that of all the things the government has deemed non-essential, liquor stores continue to be right on the top of the list of essentials.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, really, you have to wonder about, you just have to wonder. There are a lot of things you have to wonder about, actually. And it's going to be interesting when this is all over and there are all of these investigations. But to go back to what you're saying about calling people, first of all, you can ask them, saying that just reaching out and showing the person that you care about them, even just that, will really help. And it also helps you because it makes you feel as though you're doing something important. You have a purpose. You're doing something worthwhile, and you're not just kind of looking at the four walls. So reaching out is super important. And of course, if someone is feeling suicidal, you can still call 911. I mean, of course, you reach out. The first thing would be friends and family and so on, and your doctor, and a hospital emergency room. But also 911, they do still answer the calls.
Yep. Well, Doc, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, when this craziness is past and your hamster wheel brings you to the East Coast, you'll join us in the studio for a real liquid lunch. And
That sounds good.
I will tell you this, and I'm sure you know this because you're a very well trained psychiatrist, but you'd be really surprised when you said before, well, one drink isn't really going to do much. You'd be really surprised the amount of people who come down to the studio who are a little more buttoned up and maybe they don't get out of the office in the middle of the day to have a drink, and maybe after work they do, or on the weekends. You'd be really surprised by how some straight-laced folks may have one drink to calm their nerves before they go on air, and their personality is so much better after that one drink. For entertainment purposes, it's stimulating. I can tell you that. Well, Doc, thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we can meet in person. And until then, hopefully you'll join us more to keep people aware and advocating on the behalf of, at least in a time of need, reaching out to people, talking to them, touching them any way you possibly can.
Yes, absolutely. It would be a pleasure.